Welcome to the Pierced Hearts podcast, where we explore the treasure and suffering. I'm here with Armando De Zayas. Hey, Armando.
Hey Jay, good to see you, man.
Nice to see you too. Nice to see you too. So can you tell us like a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, let me see. I'm 66 years young. I was born in Havana, Cuba in 1958, and I came to this country with my mom after my parents got divorced after I was born. No fault of my own. Um, they just went their separate ways, and so I came to the States with my mom, and we
Nice.
lived in Miami a little bit, and then moved to New Jersey, and we lived in New Jersey for a couple of years before we ended back in Miami. At which point, my dad had arrived from Cuba at that time with his new wife, and I went to live with him, and so
Sweet.
so I lived with him up through high school, um, and then after high school, I joined the army, and I spent 3 years in the army.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Why did you leave from Cuba?
Well, it was the communist regime that took over, and my parents didn't want me being raised in a communist country.
Okay.
They wanted to have freedom not only for themselves but for me, and so they knew that they couldn't stay there, and so they immigrated, and we came here with you've heard the stories with nothing in our pockets,
Yeah.
and then and worked. My mom worked as a waitress at the beginning, and then she got her real estate license and sold real estate. Um, and then she remarried. Um, and as a matter of fact, I'll back up because it's interesting based on what I have now, which we'll discuss later. Um, my mom was going to abort me,
Interesting.
right? And she had fallen out of love with my dad, and things weren't going well, and so she didn't see a future, with my dad, and now she was pregnant. And what happened was she confided in her first cousin, who was being raised with her. My grandmother was raising her too, and so they grew up like sisters. And she confided in her, and she kept it a secret up until about 2 weeks before the actual abortion, and she couldn't hold it, and she ran to my grandmother and told her what my mom was planning. And my grandmother at that point told her, well, if that baby doesn't come into this world, that's not the only funeral we're going to celebrate here.
Yeah.
And so consequently, thanks be to God, here I am. But if you think of it, it's the first time I faced death, not
Exactly.
even knowing
I
it,
mean, it's
right?
it's the, I mean, it's
Well,
the first miracle, the
yeah,
miracle
right,
of life.
right, right there. And
Yeah.
what I find funny is they wanted to escape communism because they wanted me to grow up in with freedom, but yet
Yeah,
she
exactly.
was willing to end my freedom at one
So they
point.
wanted you.
Uh,
Okay,
mm,
they left the country for you.
mm-hmm.
So it wasn't because of like religion. Was there any
No,
part
no,
of?
they weren't really. I wouldn't say they were Catholic, but I'm not. I wouldn't say that they were practicing Catholics,
Okay,
right?
that's fair.
They were Catholic through baptism, and I was baptized in Cuba. Um, and then another funny story. So when we moved to New Jersey, my mom. I think one of those things. My mom takes me to Sacred Heart Catholic School in
Uh huh.
Trenton, New Jersey. For
Nice.
some reason, she had this thing about putting me in Catholic school. And so they asked her for the baptismal papers, and of course she didn't have them. We left Cuba, basically on the run. And she swore to the priest, "No, he is baptized, And you have any pictures? No, I mean, we have nothing." And he said, "Okay, well, listen." So he grabs my hand and he takes me over to the sacristy sink, where he turns on the water, and he sticks my head under the sink, and he baptizes me.
Wow.
And he says, "Okay, well, you're baptized now. You're good to go." And I went to
Wow.
Sacred Heart, and I got.
Baptized under a sink.
Yeah, yeah,
That's a first.
and I always thought I was special because I got baptized twice, even though we
Yeah.
know you're only baptized once, right?
Yeah.
And so I always felt special. Hey, I got baptized twice, and that's where I did my first communion in Sacred Heart.
Nice.
Yeah,
So then you said army. So you went.
Army after high school for 3 years. It was eight months after I met my wife. She was a sophomore in high school. I was a senior. She was 15. I was 17, and we met on holy ground. It was another story that's I look back on it now and I can see how God, is doing His work.
Yeah.
And we've been married for 42 years now. But 8 months after we met and we were in love, even at that young age, I always had the plan to leave and join the army and move on. I just wanted to expand my horizons, do
Yeah.
something exciting, something new, and so yeah. So I spent 3 years in the service, and once I got out, then I went to college, and after college we got married, um, and 4 years into our marriage, our first son was born. AJ, coincidentally,
Yeah.
you know. Another AJ. My father was AJ because he was Armando Jesus, right? And my son's
Wow.
Armando Javier. But anyway,
Amazing.
so and then my second son Alex, and then my third son Adrian were born. Now I have a grandson AJ, Armando Jorge, right?
A lot of
A
AJs.
lot of AJs, yeah.
They must
And
be cool.
it is. It's
Yeah.
super cool. So and so here we are. Husband, father, grandfather.
Okay,
Never
so
thought.
during that, like all this going on through your life, like where at any time did you ever get like serious about your faith? Or was it a thing like ever since going to Catholic school when you were young, or was it something after the army? Was it when you met your wife? Like when was that when you got like very serious about your faith?
Yeah. Um, in the army, two things happened in the army. My father was a big believer in Santa Barbara for Cubans. Is one of our saints, and he had given me a medallion of Santa Barbara, and he even had a little statue in the house and everything. And I would always tell him, Dad, why don't you just go straight to Jesus? Like
Yeah.
everything's about Santa Barbara. And so before I left for the army, he gave me a little gold medallion, and I lost it.
Oh no.
And I swore to him I didn't throw it away or get rid of it. I literally lost it. And one day, walking through this parking lot, as I'm walking, I noticed something silver shining on the asphalt. And I looked at it closely, and I realized that it was a cross that was turned upside down, and it was encrusted in the asphalt.
Wow.
So I pulled out a knife, and I plucked it out, and it was Jesus on the cross. It was like a pewter cross, and that struck me. And what struck me was, I always went to Jesus first, and that happened shortly after I had lost the medallion my father had given me, and so I kept it, always thinking that when I got out of the army, I would wear it as a chain, which I did. I never lost it. Got out of the army, and then I had it molded in gold, and that's what I wore.
Wow.
And I still have that. And so, and the other thing was,
And like what age was that?
oh,
again?
that was I had just turned 18 when
Okay,
I
so right when-
enlisted.
Nice.
A year later, we were in a pickup accident in Louisiana. We went off the road at 110 miles an hour. It was 15-mile-an-hour curve, and of course we couldn't take it.
Yeah.
So the truck spun out, rolled down the hill, hit the bottom of the hill, hit the tree line 12 feet high, landed on its side. Passenger was thrown out of the truck. I had to pull the other guy out. It was three of us, none of us wearing a seatbelt. Miraculously, nothing happened to me. The other two had a broken pelvic bone, clavicle. I had scratches, but I remember getting back to my barracks that night and lighting candles. I had never done that.
Uh-huh.
I was thanking God that I hadn't died. We found out that 15 people had died
Wow.
to date on that same curve, and so I thanked God. So again, God kept coming up. You heard that inner voice, and then living with my dad, we went to Corpus Christi Catholic school, middle school, and they had a grotto there, and with the Virgin Mary that was beautiful. And I remember, praying rosaries there. I was an altar boy there. I was even in the choir, the school choir, and I remember those days as very peaceful days, happy days, and I never forgot that. Even after high school, where basically I stopped practicing. Once I went off to college and was doing my own thing, I wasn't practicing or anything, and so, we got married, And I was so disconnected from the faith, as a matter of fact. My wife and I did the engaged encounter in preparation for our marriage. And I literally walked out of that.
Wow. That's crazy.
And yeah, it was crazy. I went because she was she's a true Catholic woman, raised her family practicing, involved in parish life. I had none of that. I just went because I needed to please her because that's we were going to get
Yeah,
married in a
exactly.
Catholic
Yeah.
church, and so on the first day of the retreat, the priest and the two laymen are there talking to us how important God is in the marriage and going on and on and of course, the cynical me at the time, I'm sitting there going, like marriages work, without Christ. There's plenty of people that don't believe that have been married happily. So so who needs all that? And so anyway, so the priest he says, before we break for lunch, we're gonna go to each table, and we're gonna ask you guys, what does God mean to you in your life? And I said, oh God, okay. And so he starts at the first table, and I'm hearing the first couple, oh, God to me is everything, and I can't live without Christ. And then as he went to each table, this is in the cafeteria, right? Cafeteria tables. We're halfway down the hall, and they're basically mimicking all the same answers. And now again, me, oh, a bunch of hypocrites, I'm judging all of a sudden, right? A bunch of hypocrites, yeah, like nobody could come up with their own
Yeah,
answer, right?
exactly. Yeah.
So I'm not gonna play that game. So by the time he got to us, he asked my wife, who of course practicing Catholic, beautiful answer. The couple next to us had already left. Couples were walking out for lunch already, and now they turned to me and they asked me, "What does God mean to you in your life?" And I said, God, well, to tell you the truth, look, I'm here because of her, and I don't believe in God. I think it's just a crutch for the weak, actually. And so I don't think I need this. And the two lay guys, the two lay persons, lay ministers, now I know. Well, how could you say that? How could you say that there is no God? How can you say you don't believe in God? That you don't need God, that it's a crutch. Don't you see? And I'm going like, look, man, I was an altar boy. I was in the choir.
Yeah.
I went to Catholic school
A lot of
for
Catholics
5
said
years
that,
or
yeah.
whatever, And so, I've read plenty, and then so I just don't have a need for it, And they were back and forth, and the priest finally holds up his hand, and he looks me straight in the eye and he says, I know what you have in your heart, and one day you're gonna come full circle, and you're gonna meet Christ.
Wow.
And with that, he stood up and left. I stood up and left, and I did not go to the next 2 days of the retreat. My wife went by herself. I later find out that she almost didn't marry me because of that.
Wow.
God had other plans.
That's
But
crazy.
yeah, but talk about my relationship with God and how it all came about.
How did that affect you whenever the priest said that to you?
I one of the things I want to do, if God has mercy on me and I get to heaven, is I want to look him up,
Okay.
because I believe that once we get to heaven, where all truth is becomes real and all questions are answered, I want to say, Jesus, where is he? Because I want to talk. 'Cause I want to tell him how right you were, that I was going to come full circle. He couldn't. How he knew that,
Yeah.
how he saw that in me, I don't know. But I would love to ask him.
Yeah, that's
at
pretty
that
crazy.
point. It is.
And so you went to school, Catholic school, everything, and it just went away. You just didn't believe God anymore. What happened for that to happen to you? Because a lot of people
Yeah.
go through things maybe something tragic, or maybe they just stop believing, right? And they just don't feel God anymore. What happened to you that made you feel so disconnected to God for you to say that he's not real?
It's simple. We moved. And we were no longer part of a parish. And since my father at this point I was living with, and my stepmom, they weren't practicing. They weren't going to church on Sundays. They weren't practicing. So naturally we weren't going, and so we had friends, and so we were doing our thing. I started working part-time, and then hanging out with friends, and so God was never in the picture. He was never part of the equation, right? And so what happens when that happens is you become distant. I didn't pray. My grandmother would, I would see, I get up in the morning and have breakfast, and I look over at the couch, and my grandmother would be there praying the rosary, and and that's about as close to God as I would get.
Yeah.
You know.
Grandma's always pray the rosary.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's funny because she had a little plastic statuesque of San Martin de Porre, Saint
Okay.
Martin de Porre, right? And he's black, right?
Yeah.
Well, she would pray the rosary because she's the shortest one in my family, and I was short, and so she would pray the rosary every morning with San Martin on one hand and the rosary in the other hand. And she prayed the rosary that I would not inherit her gene of being short. She would be rubbing his face. Well, she rubbed him white.
Oh, wow.
I always thought San Martin was white until I said, wait a minute, what happened here?
That's
But
funny.
my grandmother, God bless her, yeah, she was the one that was religious, but yeah, we just weren't
So
attached.
you're pretty much saying like you kind of always have to stay in community. Like if you kind of want to like stay in your faith and still really believe God, like community is probably a big help, right?
That's a huge help. You have to. You know, we have a saying at Emmaus retreats. You know, when men do that retreat, and we tell them you have to stay connected. It's like a relationship. I mean, at first you may be in love, but if you stop seeing each other, and you stop talking even, and there's no interest there, and what's going to happen? That's going to die, you know, and pretty much that's what happened. You have to stay connected, you know, yourself and with people who are practicing. That'll keep you, you know, that'll keep you there. You know, thanks be to God, I met my wife, and I grew up in very dysfunctional family. You know, my first stepfather would cheat on my mom, and the verbal fights were awful. And in the middle of the night, she would wake me up and put on my pajamas and throw me in the backseat of the car. And then she'd go to the different bars in the neighborhood and park and wait for my stepfather to come out with a different woman so she could catch him. You know, and it was just awful.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
That was my first step. My second stepfather would beat her.
Wow.
And I would put my sister on my lap, and we could hear him in the next room beating my mom. And the only thing that would calm my sister was when I would put a rosary over her head,
Wow.
around her neck, and then she would stop crying immediately. And so that was, you know, that was hard. That was tough, you know, to go through that. But very dysfunctional. Whereas with my wife, I mean, it was just beautiful. Her family was beautiful, is beautiful, and they were practicing, you know, family. And I started going to church with her.
Yeah, that
Right.
helps. Yeah.
Yeah, so that you know, that was huge, huge
No, yeah, for
impact
sure.
in my life. Yeah.
No, yeah. That's amazing. Now I want to talk about your suffering.
Mm.
This is the Pierced Hearts podcast. We talk about suffering. So, can you explain your suffering?
My suffering.
And when did it start? I mean,
Yeah, it's funny. We suffer from the time we're born, right? You know, it used to be you're born, you're taken out of your mother's womb, and you're spanked right away.
Yeah.
You know, right off the bat, we're experiencing pain, and we're going from a nice warm place to all of a sudden this cold room with a lot of lights, and so right off the bat you're suffering.
yeah.
And I just told you a little bit about my early childhood, you know, with my stepfathers and whatnot. But most recently, the hardest thing is, you know, when you find out that you have an illness that you know that may take your life, right? I've always been a passionist. I was a passionist before I knew I was a passionist. To me, everything's about the passion of the Christ. That's why I like Lent so much, to see what Christ suffered for us, and whatnot. When I saw the movie The Passion, oh my God, you know, I was in tears, just tears, just watching what he went through. The pain, the anguish, the physical, you know, the spiritual, the mental pain that he suffered, you know, through all that. And so that's what I hang on to really. And so what happened was, I've always been fit. I've always been healthy. I've been fit. And one morning I went for a bike ride, and I got back home, and I had a headache, which was not unusual because when I'm off the bike, my wife and I were walking, 3 miles every day,
Yeah.
3.5 miles, getting ready for the Camino de Santiago, which I
Yeah,
had
the
done in
Camino, yeah.
2019, but we were going to do it together now. And so we were practicing for that. And one Saturday morning, I said, "Sweetie, do you mind?" I look over at my bike. I have a De Rosa, Italian bike, and I said, "Sweetie, do you mind if I go for a bike ride? It's a beautiful day." And she says, "No, go ahead. It's been a while." So when I don't ride for a while, and then I ride, I get a tension headache because of my neck muscles.
Yeah.
I was Saturday morning, uh, typically a couple Advil. I eat something, sit
Yeah.
in the recliner, take a little nap, wake up, headache's gone. Well, it wasn't gone. Sunday wasn't gone. Wednesday, now we're at Wednesday, still headache's still there. And so I left a message with my primary. I said, "Hey, doc, this is happening. I have a headache for 5 days. It doesn't go away." And immediately he calls me back and he says, "Hey, I scheduled an MRI for you. You have to be there. It was hard to get, so you have to be there soon." So I run over, I get the MRI done, get back home. My room was nice and dark, still had the headache. I lay down, and about an hour and a half later, he calls. He says, "Armando, I have good news for you." I said, "Well, doc, hit me with it." It wasn't I have good news and bad news. It was just like I don't have good news,
Yeah.
period, right?
Yeah.
He says, "Listen, you have a big mass in your brain and severe swelling, and you got to drop what you're doing and get to the hospital right now
Wow.
because you can start having seizures because of the swelling." And that was the cause of the headaches. So I walked into, my wife was working in the office. We have a room in our house that's her office. And I looked at her and I just broke down. And so I told her, and so, we dropped what we were doing, got to the hospital, and they started doing their tests and CT scans and whatever. And sure enough, I have a baseball-sized tumor in my brain. And later I was kidding with my sons. I have my two older sons played baseball. I mean, really good guy, really good baseball players, and we did everything year round. I said, "Guys, this is what I was left with
Yeah.
after all these years of baseball, baseball-sized tumor." They said, "Dad, we did play basketball too." I said, "Oh, thank God for that." Anyway, so I was on a Wednesday, the 22nd, and 7 days later, I was being prepped for surgery. Now,
How are those 7 days?
oh my God.
Like, can you explain that? And
Well, I
just a little
do
bit.
I do research, and so the first thing, by the way, so what I have is I have a grade 4 glioblastoma. It's the most aggressive form and deadliest form of brain cancer. There is no cure. All they can hope to do is longevity of life. And when they speak about longevity of life, they're talking months, not even years. Um, the the typical protocol that they've been using for years now only gives you about a median life expectancy of 22 months. And so the more research I did, the more depressed I got because I saw that, I was going to die of this thing because it recurs, it comes back, right? So the first thing they do is they do surgery, and then they do radiation and chemo. That's the standard care, and that buys you 22 months. I was able to get into a trial study where it was 7 cycles of 42 days each, 30 radiations up front. So it's strong radiation, 5 days a week, and then followed by oral chemo, um, and then hopefully that'll buy you 22 months. If and
Yeah.
not to get hung up on the numbers because they tell you that everybody's different, and some people have lived for 28 months, and I'm well, great, 22 months, 28 months,
Yeah, same thing.
6 more months. And so, yeah, those 7 days, because again, I jumped right into the research, which is what I should not have done,
Yeah.
right?
And would you say, I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
would you say that like when you do that research, was the evil spirit
Oh,
creeping in?
you forget who's in control, right? Now it's about me, and now it's about my cancer, and I'm gonna die, right? So I need to find out as much as I can about what I have, and whereas in my humanity, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I was just caught up in the reality of what had just happened. This is what I have, and more than likely I'm going to die from this. And so I was not in a very good place. So when they called to schedule the surgery, I asked them, listen, my wife and my sons, and she says, well, there's a waiting room right outside the surgery, for 2 people, so your wife and your son could be there. I go, well, is there another waiting room, for other family? She goes, yeah, right behind that one, there's another room for more family. And I said, oh, great. Is there another room?
Yeah.
She said, how many people are you expecting, right?
Yeah.
I said, well, between my family and my church family, you don't know how many of these nuts are going to show up, so it's going to be crazy. And sure enough, that's what it was. We have a great parish family, but to your question, those 7 days leading up to that surgery, it got to the point that I was pretty much at peace with it after a while. After I realized I accepted it, I said, okay, this is what I have, and I'm going to have the surgery. They're going to take it out, and it's all going to be good. And, a lot of people are praying for me, and we're just taking it a day at a time, and we'll go into the surgery in good spirits and face it. And so that's how it went.
Did you ever get like a peace?
Yeah, I was that morning as they were prepping me for surgery. My wife was there with me, my son, and I just felt that the surgery itself. Listen, I would tell when people would say, "Hey, it's a baseball-sized tumor, and they're gonna operate." I mean, aren't you worried? My answer was, listen. If this thing goes sideways during the surgery, and I know one of the things they first said, well, you could die, right? You could die from the surgery. It's a big mass. If I die and I open my eyes and I see the face of my wife, I win. But if I die and I open my eyes and I see the face of Jesus, it's a win-win.
Yeah, exactly.
Either way, I don't lose.
Yeah.
And that's what brought me the most peace. Is knowing that either way, regardless of how it went, it was gonna be all right.
Actually, you could just keep talking. Go. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
That's my camera.
That's okay.
Yours is more important.
and so that brought me a lot of peace going into the surgery. The surgery itself was 2 hours long, and I thought it was much longer than that, but it was pretty quick.
What's up, guys? If you guys are this long in the video, if you are enjoying it, please like and subscribe. It will help my channel get up and help more people with suffering. Thank you, guys.
When they wheeled me out of the operating room into the hallway, I was already awake. The hallway was lined with family, parishioners. I mean, you name it. It was awesome to see that support.
Wow.
That was on a Wednesday morning, and Friday morning they discharged me to go home.
Wow.
It was just crazy. My son AJ, who's here now, he said, Dad, so many people praying for you, and they're still asking about you and whatnot. I think we should put out a little video letting him know. And so right there, I sat down, and he whipped out his phone, and I sent family and friends a message letting them know that, by the grace of God, here I am, and how much I appreciated their prayers, right? I couldn't have done it without those prayers and without that support. That I would thank God, and I would serve God, and proclaim His glory from the highest mountain to the lowest valley. And I would serve Him till the day I died, so here I was, and it was all good, and I went home. Yeah.
Sweet. Was there any because I know with a lot of different stories about suffering, it could either go well, or it could go completely bad, and people could just go through even more suffering. Was there any time where maybe God spoke to you, and did you ever have any moment with Him?
Yeah, one thing this does is it gives you plenty of time alone, right? And that could be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you let it roll. For me, the time alone, it leaves open time for the other spirit, as Monsignor would say, right? That spirit of evil, and you have to catch yourself, because your mind could go all kinds of ways. And I didn't want to go there, and a couple times I was there, because you're thinking, my thing was, my family, right? So I would think about my kids, and now I have a 7-year-old grandson, and thinking about him, and and how much I wanted to be there, as he grew up and whatnot, and my wife, and who was going to take care of my wife, and I wouldn't be around to protect her, and so you start thinking all these things, right? And so that's a suffering in itself, because you're not in control.
Exactly.
It's all
Yeah.
going to be taken away, and so that was not good. Um, it was mental. In a way, it was spiritual. It was never physical because thank God I never had pain. Um, but then one day it hit me, as I went into I was going to radiation, and I was going through the parking lot, and I see this father taking out this little boy. He must have been 3 years old, in his pajamas out of the car. And I looked at them both as I walked by. I said good morning. I looked at him and I said, "Oh my goodness, the little boy must be the patient, right?" And I have a real soft spot for kids. And so I went in. I said hi to the security guard there. They already know me, right? So I go in and I go to the desk to sign in for my radiation, and I see this technician walking by with a remote control truck that they have there for kids,
Uh-huh.
and he's going to the entrance. And I said, "Oh, that's going to be for the little boy." And so I didn't want to look. Sure enough, when I look over at the end, I see the little boy come in with his dad, and his dad puts him in the truck.
Oh wow.
And now they're bringing he's in the truck, and they're driving him back, and I just start crying. And I said to myself, here I am, okay, I got what I got, but look at him. He was all smiles, and as he's coming, and I said, I gotta stop. He can't see me cry. He can't see me doing
Yeah.
this. And I turned around, and I wiped my face, and I took a deep breath, composed myself. And as his dad walked by, I said good morning. I go, listen, I'll pray for you and your son. He said, thank you. And the son had a real big swollen neck right here on the jaw, and so it just broke my heart. And I said, you know what? I have nothing. What I have is nothing. I've lived a life already. This little boy is just starting off his life, and look at what he's going through. I could just imagine all the pinches and pokes and all the suffering he's going through at such a young age. Why
Exactly.
am I gonna complain, right?
Yeah.
And so that put it all in perspective for me at that point of where I was and what I wanted to do with it. What did I want to do with that suffering? And so I said, you know what? I'm going to turn it over to Christ. It's
And
my
that's really all you
suffering,
could do.
but my suffering is his
Yeah.
suffering. When I suffer, he suffers. When I cry, he cries. I mean, he's our God. He's our creator, right? And so I'm going to turn it over to him. So much so that I'm going to be his face. I want to be his face. I'm not going to get all down on myself and have a pity party and then walk around gloom and doom and make it about myself. It's about him. And so how is somebody going to have hope in Christ if they see somebody who has Christ, not
Yeah.
reflecting that, right?
Exactly,
I mean,
yeah.
there's hope. I mean, there's Christ at the end of the day. And so that's what I wanted to reflect.
Do you
is that.
think this suffering has brought you closer to God?
Oh, most definitely. I've given quite a few talks through this journey, different ministries and whatnot, but I have never had more clarity about my relationship with God, my love for Christ, than I do now. I mean, it's just unbelievable. The things that He lets me see, where I recognize Him, right? It's so much clearer now. The little
Yeah.
the little things he leaves for you to see, and you go, oh my God, thank you,
Yeah.
little things, but yeah, I've never had as much, and I don't know why that is, but I'm just so in tune.
I mean, it could be that you're super close to him because of your suffering.
Yeah,
I mean, in a way, I mean, it could be that way,
I think you're right. I think once we turn over our suffering to Him, and He says that, give me your yoke, I'll make it light, right? Once you turn it over to Him, He's with you. He's right there carrying it with you. And like I said, I feel when I cry, He cries, and I feel, when I'm suffering, He's right there. He's right there holding me. One of my favorite pieces of art is the Pieta. When Mary's holding her son's dead body. I mean, that
that's devastating.
it's tough. It just kills me. But then again, that's what it's about right there. and that's how I feel he's holding me, most times, right?
Yeah.
I just turn it over to him.
Yeah. Has there been any like visions or
Yeah, yeah.
can you talk about
Yeah,
them a
we
little bit?
had. So, people always, people ask me, um, don't you have hope that God could cure you? And I said, yeah, God could do that. I mean, God could cure me. I'm sure God, if He wanted to. I mean, if He willed it, I could be cured. But at the end of the day, I mean, why me, right? There's so many other people that would probably, this is my opinion. I'm more reserved. My wife said once, well, why not you, right? And but what I do know is God gives you the grace to deal with it, and He carries you through it. And I'll give you, for instance, a little bit earlier, I told you about, you know, my biggest fear in in dying is not being there for my family, my wife, and whatnot. So
Yeah.
anyway, but I'll get. So I had two. I call them visions because, it's like a short movie. Um, so right before the surgery, I had to have an MRI done, and I had had a couple MRIs done before. And I remember early on, once I went into the MRI, they gave you this little button. They say, "Well, if you get claustrophobic, ring the button and we'll bring you out."
Uh-huh.
And so they had laid me down. I go in and I open my eyes, and the thing's like right there, and you feel like you're in a coffin. And I start ringing the bell,
Yeah.
"Get me out!" And they get me out. And so anyway, so this time around, they said, "Hey, this is going to be the last MRI before your surgery. You want some medication?" I said, "No, I think I could mentally handle it now. That's not a problem. No medication." "Well, but why? Are you sure?" I go, why medication? It's going to be an hour long.
Oh wow.
Typically, they're 25 to maybe 45 minutes. She said, "It would be about an hour, 10 minutes." I go, "That long?" She says, "Yeah, we're going to do it with contrast, without contrast, and you can't move and whatnot." And I said, "No, I think I can do this. Just give me a second." So
Sounds tough.
took a deep breath and laid down. And she says, "You want some music?" I said, "No, just I'm fine." So machine takes you in, right? And the light goes out. She goes, "Okay, we're about to start." And so I start praying, the Our Father, Hail Mary, the Glory Be. And then, I do this little thing where I go, "Jesus, have mercy on me, a sinner." You know, uh, as the leper says, "I know that if you will it, I'll be clean from this." So
Yeah.
I humbly ask you to heal me, for my wife's sake and my grandson and my kids and my family and my parish family. And then, so I kept on repeating that and repeating it. And I hear so I could hear in the background the MRI. I don't know if you've been in an MRI machine,
Yeah, I
but it's
have.
like, and you see all these noises, right? But I don't stop. I keep on praying. Well, it got to the point where I wasn't hearing anything anymore. And all of a sudden, I find myself in the tomb. And I'm in the tomb, in a corner of the tomb, looking down, and I see the body of Christ on the slab.
Wow.
And it's kind of dark in there. And right above him, there's 8 angels that are just circling around his body, and they're crying. And I just don't have words. After a while, they come down, two at his feet, 2 at his head, and 2 on either side. And they start cleaning him with their tears.
Wow.
And then they start to disrobe him, to put on a clean robe. And he stands up. I never see his face. I just see his body. And he starts walking towards the entrance to the tomb. And 2 of the angels get there to the tomb, and as they get there, the stone rolls away, and the sun comes in, and he walks out. And as the sun comes in and lights up the cave, the light in the MRI machine comes on. "Armando, we're done. You did a great job. I mean, I don't know what you did, but it's the best MRI imaging we've gotten, And so
That is
then
crazy.
so I hear the thing. So I come out, and she goes, "Armando, what were you doing in there?" I was just praying. She goes, "Armando, you didn't move, you didn't flinch. I mean, you you were just like perfect. She goes, if all my patients for the rest of I have a backlog. If the rest of my patients are like you tonight, I'll be done early. It was just amazing. And I said,
Wow.
well, thanks be to God, right? And so it just blew me away. It was beautiful, and yeah, and so that was the first one. Which
Wait, so
yeah,
for that
yeah.
first one, like, just like it felt real. Like it
Oh
was like
no,
you were
I
there.
was I was there. I was looking at him. I was I could see his feet. And I could see his I could see his feet. I could see the blood had come through the through the dressing through his burial
Uh-huh.
clothes, right? So I could see that. I could vividly see the angels had brown wings, by the way, right? So I could
Brown wings.
brown wing, big brown wings. Um, yeah, I mean as real as could be. I mean as real as could be. It was
And
just
two
this
angels moved.
and two angels as they got to the front where the stone was,
Oh,
the
they
stone just rolled away. I mean, they didn't do anything. They just got there and the stone rolled away. And at that point he was already dressed, and then he walked out and the angels went after him. And
wow.
that was that. It was just very simple but very real, um, very real. I mean, it's and then for the light of the MRI machine to come on at just at that time
Wow.
was just amazing. But that's how much at peace I was at that moment. And that's what I say. God will give you the grace, and God will get you through those times, no
For
matter
sure,
what you're
yeah.
going through. He'll do something that'll help you get through that. So yeah, so that was the first one. Um,
Oof, that was a crazy
which
first one. I don't know
yeah,
how.
which was a yeah. I never quite expected. The other one I was really, if you want to get into that one,
Yeah, yeah,
I'll tell
let's
you.
do
The
it.
other one was intense, but for a different reason. It was one of those days where I was laying. It was a dark day for me, uh, and I was thinking about death, right? I was thinking about dying and in the cemetery, and I can see myself, in the coffin and the mass going on, and then again, once I started thinking about my wife and my kids and my grandson, so I'm laying in bed, just tears coming down my cheeks, just thinking about death, and so I start praying again, and the same thing kind of happened. Um, you're not asleep, but you're not fully awake, you know.
Yeah.
And I found myself in the blue sky. It's just, like as if I was floating in the blue sky, right? And so I'm looking off in front of me, and there's clouds and mist, right? And beyond that, I could see kind of like a wall and a big gate, and then I see this figure, and right above him again, the same angels that I had seen in my first were there also
Oh, so
above.
it was the same ones.
Same ones, brown wings,
Brown
big
wings.
brown wings, and they're slowly, gently flapping. The mist and the clouds start separating, and I see the figures doing this to me, like come towards me, and so I start I didn't realize it yet, but as I'm getting nearer, then it hits me. It must be Christ. It must be Christ is calling me, right? Um, and so I start approaching him, and as I get to him, I drop to my knees, and I hug his feet, and I start kissing his feet, and I start asking for forgiveness. And side story to that, one of my favorite Christian songs is "I Could Only Imagine." When I could only imagine when I see him face to face. Am I going to dance? Am I going to
Yeah.
sing? Right?
That was gonna be my question. Like,
Right?
was that you doing that, or was it just happening?
Yeah. And so much so, our last night of youth group, Annie Caballero, and the band played that song one last time for me, and they said, "Armando, we're gonna make you cry," because they know how sentimental I get when I hear that song.
Yeah.
And when I told this story to a group of people that came to visit me, and she was one of them, I told her, "Annie, I don't have to imagine anymore. I know exactly how it's going to go down. When I see him face to face and I come to him, I'm going to drop to my knees and I'm going to hug his feet, and I'm going to kiss his feet to ask for forgiveness, because I don't deserve him. He's just too good, And for him to carry me through this and to let me see this, and." And so he picks me up. He grabs me by the shoulders and he picks me up and he hugs me. I still don't see his face, but I didn't need to. You know, I felt the love. So he turns me around and he just motions me to keep on walking.
Wow.
And halfway to the gate, I turn around to look back. And he tells me, remember I told you that my biggest thing is about leaving my family behind.
Yeah.
And he tells me, don't worry, I'll take care of them.
Wow.
And with that, I kept on walking. Now the gates are fully open. And the first people there to greet me are Mary and Joseph. The apostles were there. The saints. And as I'm walking through, they're patting me on the back, like welcome me in, right? And once I get through that first little crowd, then I see my father and my grandparents. I see my mother and my father-in-law, who for me were that perfect example of a Catholic, Catholic marriage, Catholic family.
Catholic
right?
role models.
The role models, you know, and they were there. And then I kept on walking, and then the banquet tables, like it says in Scripture, right? The wedding feast, right?
Yeah.
And then the choir singing, and the choir sounded just like the choir, that we have at St. John's. It was just beautiful. It was just
Wow.
beautiful. Now,
And your parish is St. John Newman.
St.
Just
John
for everybody
Newman,
that's
St. John
watching.
Newman, yeah, St. John Newman Parish. I've been there for 30 years, and that's where I did my Emmaus retreat, where I had that encounter with Christ.
Okay.
I think Pope Francis says nothing happens until you have that encounter, and I did have my encounter with him in many ways, and I never looked back. I mean, it was like amazing, and so I'm here today. But my stepmother, upon hearing this vision, she says, "Don't you see what God is telling him? That he's gonna die," And I had to, so I had to tell her, no. That's not what he's telling me. What he's telling me is, be at peace. Look at what awaits you. And whatever you think, I'll take care of everybody else at home. Don't worry. You're not in control.
Yeah.
I am. I'll take care of them. You just be welcomed, you know,
for sure.
in this beautiful, peaceful place. That's what he was telling me. Don't think about death so much, right? Look, I'm a cyclist. I always thought I'd go by getting hit by a car.
Yeah.
Right? One way or the other, at some point, it's going to be our turn, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so it doesn't matter how, it's just going to happen. What's past that? And as Christians, what's past that? It's Christ. It's God. It's being with God. It's being face to face with God. And so I pray that my soul goes to heaven, and at the second coming, my resurrected body will meet the soul.
So when you were getting to the gates of heaven, were you like, after God comforted you and said, like, don't worry, I got them, were you a little excited?
Yeah, because I got to see what I've always read about in Scripture, right? I got to see that, even though I didn't see his face, and that's reserved for that the second coming, right?
Exactly,
that we'll be walking with Christ in the garden, we'll be having conversations with him, and we'll be talking to God and seeing God's face. I mean, that's the beauty of it, right? That's what we await heaven, right? We all want to go to heaven, but we all want to go to that new heaven that God's going to create, the new heaven and the new earth, right? The second coming. So I got a glimpse of that. So he gave me a glimpse of that, put me totally at ease about the whole thing. And that's now what I hang on to.
Did you want to stay there? Because, like, I don't know. If I see the gates of heaven, I'm just like...
I'll tell you what. I didn't think about coming back.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Once he said, don't worry, I'll take care of him, that I kept on walking in, I was surrounded by love. I mean, come on. Mary, Joseph, the saints.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
My parents, my in-laws, my grandparents that loved me so much. I mean, it was just love all the way around. So you there's no reason to think about what you left behind. You're in perfection. You're in harmonious beauty and love at that moment. Why are you going to look back to suffering and pain? Let's say, right?
Exactly.
You're there, right? So that brought me a lot of comfort, and it still does. I haven't thought of death the same way again. And when that thought crosses my mind, in our humanity it happens. I quickly try to get it out. It's just okay. You're not gonna bother me with that. Just get it out of here, and I move on to other things. Yeah.
Wow. Because when you go through suffering, there's a big target on your back. Like the devil really, it's super easy to just go after you, especially when you have suffering. You know, you're like in your weakest point of your life. I mean, some would say.
Yeah.
I mean, if they don't believe in God, it's really hard to like get to the point where the devil's not touching you no more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I mean, that's just something that's really cool, and I can't believe you saw Mary and Joseph. Like, so now, um, now since you have more, like your suffering returned.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so if you could explain a little bit, it went away. Your
Yeah. So
your
I had
tumor, right?
yeah. So they took the tumor out, and a couple MRIs later, there was just really nothing there. It was good. It was clean. So you're feeling you're feeling comfortable. I knew I hadn't beat it because you don't beat it. At some point, it does recur. At some point, it does come back. Now, typically, the average is about a year. It comes back, you know, and then you have to go through the same thing again. If it's operable, they operate. Then it's radiation and chemo, unless you get into a trial study. The trial study, though, you know, it's new drugs and new techniques that might buy you, an extra year maybe, right?
Yeah.
And so here we are 7 months later, and I go in for an MRI, and they see that I do have a new growth. So I had to go back in for another MRI and a PET scan, and then one's called an MRS, and that determined that definitively it was the tumor had come back. Now it's small. It's not a baseball size one,
Yeah.
thank God, but it's small.
Yeah, thank
But
God.
it's still there, and this is a type of cancer that's very aggressive. It grows very fast, and so to my shock, here it is again. But again, my wife comforted me. She says, "Hey, we got this. It's small, and now the question is could it be operated on? Because it's a little bit deeper now.
Mm-hmm.
It's more towards my ventricle, on my right ventricle, and could the surgeon get to it? Because if they can't get to it and it's inoperable, then they can't do anything. Basically, that's going to grow, and it's going to take over the ventricle on the right side, which affects your left side. So I'll start losing motor skills on my left side, maybe even my eyesight on my left side. So so things could happen."
Yeah.
And but again, I accepted death, and I think that's the first step. Well, once you accept death, then it doesn't scare you anymore, especially knowing what awaits you.
Yeah.
Right?
That was nice.
So yeah, it was a shock, and I said, and I do get sometimes still. I say to myself, oh my God, I have to go through this all over again. Now, it's another surgery. It's more chemo. To buy me how much time this time? Another 7 months, another year, before maybe it comes back again, and so now the game is, so as we're sitting here, we were just up in Tampa at the Moffitt Cancer Center, and the surgeon there says, yes, he can get to it. It's not a problem. He said, that's the easiest part, is getting it out. It's what we do afterwards. So I'll be on a trial study there. And so we're going to tackle it. We're going to tackle it, as a family, and God has this. God has been leading us, and this time around, He's led us to where we need to be for this now, to this new. It's a new journey now, right? But again, it's going through the same. I'm talking about me. I know my wife suffers too. She's the quiet warrior, right? But I know she worries. I mean, I know it pains her and my sons. My friends.
Yeah.
And I tell people, I'm a sentimentalist, right? But and when I cry, it's really because of love. The love I have for them, the love that I know that they have for me, right? And when I cry, when I give talks, or when I'm around, sometimes I'll be in adoration by myself. I'll take a walk and I'll stop into the chapel and I'll cry just the same because of how much, God loves me, right? But and that still happens, right? But I'm still strong, right? I know at the end of the day, I know that, hey, suffering is just part of the thing. God never says you weren't going to suffer.
Yeah.
God didn't say
Never
life
said
was
that.
going to. Yeah, He didn't say life was going to be fair. Right?
Yeah. No,
It's how you handle it. It's how you carry it. And I've I've taken the purpose of, you know what, I'm going to carry it with my chin held high, with God with me, and because I have a prayer army behind me, a lot of people that believe that build me up, and I'm not going to fail. I'm just going to live each day and be thankful to God, which I am, and then just show that with Christ anything is possible, right? I don't a person without faith, I don't know how they carry
Yeah.
how they carry suffering. I mean, I don't, and in this world does everything to tell you, listen, don't suffer.
Yeah.
Take this or we're the most medicated country on earth
Yeah.
because nobody wants to suffer, right? But if they just knew the different way that they could approach it, if they only believed in God.
So what would you
and
tell
Christ.
people that are suffering? And like maybe they have different types of suffering, right? Like maybe there is somebody else with a tumor, maybe there's somebody with like a kid with cancer, maybe somebody lost his leg. Like any type of suffering, like is there any advice you would give to them?
Yeah. I always think about what God did for us, is what I would tell them. God gave his only son. Not only did he give his only son for our salvation, but what his son had to go through, knowing that, what he was going to suffer for us. I would always say in youth group, when I would talk to the kids, I would tell them, there's no suffering on earth that you'll go through, physically, mentally, emotionally, none whatsoever, that Christ himself didn't suffer. But yet he went to it on his own free will. He took it, he absorbed it, and he took it to the cross. Even on the cross for 3 hours hanging there. At the end he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, right? That's love. And so how could I complain about my suffering? So whenever I've suffered physically or mentally, I just go there, the passion. I just go to him, and that's what I would. That's it's not. I'm not going to say that's the secret. No. That's the reality. That's the reality. He created us. He's with us. He's here. We're the bodies of the temple of the Holy Spirit. Tie yourself to that. Tie yourself to that cross with him. Climb up on that cross with him.
Yeah.
And that'll get you through it.
I mean, God himself went through suffering.
Exactly.
What makes us not think that we're going to go through it,
We're not going to go through it, right?
Yeah.
But what awaits us is so much more. And once you realize that what awaits us is so much more than we could even imagine, eyes have not seen,
yeah.
right? Then you know what? And this is short term.
It's like this.
This is short term. And if you think about, infinity, we're only a dot on that line.
Yeah.
Right? We're going to be an everlasting life, right? Forever. And there's so much to do. People would say, well, what am I going to do forever? Well, I can think of a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
God has plenty of us to keep us entertained, right? But that's what awaits us. And so, as it says in Revelation, there'll be no more gnashing of teeth, no more tears, no more pain, no more crying, and that's what I await. The day that I don't have to face the suffering of this world anymore, because I've already been through it. I've experienced it. I made it, right? How am I going to carry it? And so what I would tell him is, turn to God, talk to God, feel his son, accept his son. Surround yourself with people that believe, because God uses them.
And what if, I'm just throwing it out there, what if there's somebody watching this that doesn't believe in God?
Well, all I would tell you is just give it a chance. Remember, I was the guy sitting there, I don't believe in God. Remember, I told the priest, I don't believe in God. It's a crutch for the weak. But here's how God works. I had a home office and I had a secretary. Her name was Mary. Virgin Mary, right? And we would have talks about faith. She knew I wasn't practicing, and my wife would go to church by herself at that time, and and she says, Armando, you should do this retreat. It's called Emmaus. It's just for men, you know. And I'd say, oh, Mary, that's not for me, man. You know, all that, you know, touchy-feely stuff, you know, it's not for me.
Yeah.
Armando, but I've had conversations with you. I think you should go. I mean, something's telling me that you should go. You know, I'm inviting you should go. Oh, Mary. And so I started going to church with my wife. And then it was that season when they were about to do the Emmaus, and the men were outside giving out flyers, right?
Uh-huh.
And I'd always say, oh, no, thanks, you know, and I keep on walking, right?
Yeah.
And it got to the point where I was embarrassed of saying no. And then I would kind of like sneak out so they wouldn't see me, right? And I call those guys the disciples, right? And so the disciples were out there inviting me. And I was still saying no. So then one day after Mass, my wife says, hey, sweetie, we have to go to Walmart. I need to return something. And so, okay. So we go to Walmart, and she goes to the return line. And back then they had a McDonald's inside the Walmart. And so I was with my younger son, and I said, hey, sit here, got him a cheeseburger and a Coke. And we sat down, and I'm looking, and there's a book of religious books, Christian books. And I had already been thinking about, oh, should I do this retreat or maybe not? You know,
Yeah.
I don't know. And I said, you know, when I was in Corpus Christi Catholic, I used to love Scripture because of the stories, you know, great stories, David and Goliath, you know. And
Yeah.
I said, well, let me go over there and see if I find a book. Maybe is there something on Scripture, because I'll start with Scripture. So I told my son, don't move right here. Papi sees you. I'm going to go look at the books. So I go over there and I start turning the swindle thing around. There's different books on Christianity, whatnot. And I look at the bottom, and there's one on Bible verses for dummies. I said, perfect, you know, perfect. You know, so I reach down and pick it up, and I open it up just like this. I just open it up because I wanted to see what the font was like, if it was going to be easy reading, whatever. And I open it up, and it's Luke 24. It's on the road to Emmaus.
Wow.
Wow. I ran to my wife, who was in line. Honey, look. He's inviting me himself. She's looking at me that I'm crazy. Mary invited me, and I said no. The disciples invited me, and I said no. And now God himself hit me with a 2x4. Look, what are the chances that I would open up this book and it's the Emmaus reading?
Wow.
And so the following Sunday, I signed up, and I went to the Emmaus. And what God and Jesus had in store for me were just unbelievable. And I never looked back. I did that weekend, and I was just hooked on Christ. You know, fell in love with God, and you know, became an usher. Started going to Wednesday morning Bible study. I have a Monday night Bible study now myself.
Wow,
right?
nice.
I just never looked back. I just, you know, Eucharistic. I mean, I was just all in for God, and still am to this day. But it took an invitation. So what I would tell them is just take that chance, take that leap, take that jump. As easy as saying, God, okay, I said I don't believe in you,
Yeah.
but you know what? I think I've reached my end here. You know, show me something, talk to me, you know. Just ask him, and then just follow that. Listen to the people around you, because you'd be surprised how God works. You
Yeah,
know,
through other people.
Through other people, you know, and that's how he expresses his love, right? And so people around you, what you read, what you see sometimes, it will take you there, right? And just don't be afraid. He's a loving God, you know, and all he wants is the best for you, right? So don't be afraid. Take that leap. Take that chance. Give love a chance, as they say, right?
Yeah.
Give love a chance. Give God a chance, because he is love. So that's what I would tell them. Just get up and take that chance, you know?
Sweet. You guys heard it. Thank you,
Yeah.
Armando, so much. It was nice
It
doing
was-
this podcast with you.
It was
And,
awesome.
Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. This is our first
Oh.
episode, and
I'm humbled
Um,
and honored that you asked me to come by and share with you and be with you here, and hopefully, you know, there's something in this conversation that somebody could take with them, and
For sure.
and I know God will use that
yeah,
as
for
he
sure.
wills, and yeah, but I appreciate you, man. Thanks
No,
so
yeah,
much.
thank you, Armando. And if everybody, if you're watching, please pray for Armando, and see you guys.